Jasmine's fingers trembled as she gripped the steering wheel, her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. The flashing lights of the ambulance faded into the distance, carrying away the man she'd seen fall from the construction scaffolding just moments ago. She hadn't caused the accident, no. A loose beam had given way, but the image of his body crumpling on the sidewalk before her parked car haunted her all the same. She'd been about to pull away from the curb when it happened. The sickening thud of impact still echoed in her ears. Jasmine had scrambled out of her car, fumbling with her phone to call 911, but it was clear from the awkward angle of his limbs and the growing pool of blood that he was already gone. The police had questioned her briefly, jotting down her statement with detached efficiency. "Just another workplace accident," one officer had muttered to his partner. Jasmine wondered how many lives had to be lost before such a thing became commonplace. In the days that followed, Jasmine found herself unable to shake the lingering unease that clung to her like a second skin. She'd catch herself staring at the spot on the sidewalk where she'd seen the body, remembering his face for that split second before impact, eyes wide, mouth agape in a silent scream. Each night she'd wake in a cold sweat, the image of his broken form seared into her mind. But as the week wore on, the sharp edges of the memory began to dull. Jasmine threw herself into her work, grateful for the distraction of spreadsheets and client meetings. By Friday, she even managed to laugh at her coworkers' bad jokes during happy hour. It wasn't until she boarded the subway for her commute home that the unease returned. As the train lurched forward, Jasmine glanced up from her phone and froze. There, at the far end of the car, stood the man from the accident. His work uniform was pristine, showing no signs of the violent end she'd witnessed. But his face, goodness, his face was exactly as she remembered it in that final moment. Eyes bulging, mouth contorted in a rictus of terror or agony. Jasmine blinked hard, certain she was hallucinating. When she opened her eyes, he was gone. Heart racing, she stumbled off at the next stop, opting to walk the rest of the way home. The cool night air helped clear her head, and by the time she reached her apartment, Jasmine had almost convinced herself it had been nothing more than her imagination playing tricks on her. That night she dreamed of falling, of plummeting through empty space, the ground rushing up to meet her. She jolted awake just before impact, gasping for air. In the dim light of early morning, Jasmine's eyes adjusted to her surroundings. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized she wasn't alone. The man from the accident stood at the foot of her bed, silent and still as a statue. This time, his eyes were closed, his expression serene, almost peaceful. Jasmine squeezed her eyes shut, willing the apparition to disappear. When she opened them again, he was gone. Over the next few weeks, these sightings became a macabre routine. The dead man would appear in crowds, on street corners, in the reflections of windows, always silent, always watching. Sometimes his face would be locked in that final moment of terror, other times eerily calm. Jasmine's life began to unravel. She stopped going out, called in sick to work more often than not. Her friends grew concerned, but she couldn't bring herself to explain. How could she tell them that she was being haunted by a man whose death she'd witnessed but hadn't caused? She began to question her own sanity. Was this guilt manifesting in some twisted form of PTSD? Or was there something more sinister at play? In desperation, Jasmine sought out a therapist. Dr. Amelia Chen listened patiently as Jasmine poured out her story, her voice cracking with emotion. "It's not uncommon for traumatic experiences to manifest in unexpected ways," Dr. Chen said gently. "Your mind may be trying to process what you witnessed." But as Jasmine described the specific details of her visions, the way the man's hard hat was always slightly tilted, the faint scar above his left eyebrow, she saw a flicker of something in the therapist's eyes. Recognition? Concern? Jasmine, Dr. Chen said slowly, I'd like you to take a look at something. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen a few times before turning it towards Jasmine. The image on the screen made Jasmine's blood run cold. It was a news article from 3 years ago, featuring a photograph of the man she'd been seeing. The headline read, Local construction worker dies in tragic accident. This man, Dr. Chen said softly, was my brother. Jasmine's mind reeled. How was this possible? She'd seen him die just weeks ago, hadn't she? As if reading her thoughts, Dr. Chen continued, I've been seeing him too. For years now. I thought I was losing my mind. The two women stared at each other, a mix of fear and relief passing between them. They weren't crazy, but the truth, whatever it was, seemed far more terrifying than any hallucination. What does it mean? Jasmine whispered. Dr. Chen shook her head slowly. I don't know, but I think he's trying to tell us something. As if on cue, the lights in the office flickered. Jasmine's gaze was drawn to the window where she saw him standing on the street below. This time, he was smiling, and this time, he beckoned.